"What the hell is this?" Preston Nolan muttered, staring at the bowl of ramen in front of him. Steam curled lazily from the surface, but the moment he took a sip, everything in him halted. The broth was flat, barely any flavor, no depth, no richness. Preston had built his name on bold, savory ramen. This wasn't just off, it was embarrassing. 14 ramen shops, all under his name. He'd bought the chain 6 years ago from a retiring chef in Seattle and spent every minute since rebranding the stores, fixing up the kitchens, refining the menu. Sales had been steady. Reviews mostly positive. But lately, something had felt off. He'd been hearing things, not complaints exactly, just gaps, dips in returning customers. A few Yelp reviews mentioning bland flavors, but nothing solid, nothing he could act on. His district managers swore everything was fine. Still, he couldn't shake the feeling, so he shaved his beard, dyed his gray hair black, got prescription-free glasses, and threw on a fake name. Eric. The plan was simple. Pose as a culinary student doing a week-long trial shift. The location, store number 11. A mid-sized shop in a busy college town. High traffic, decent profit. But it had the highest ingredient costs and oddly low customer retention. None of the staff had ever met him. Most only knew the brand was owned by some guy named Preston they never saw. That was on purpose. He kept his face out of the press and never posted photos online. He preferred to build the company, not his ego. Now, standing behind the stainless steel prep table in a black apron, he was just Eric. Day one, supposedly here to learn but really here to watch. He arrived before opening, greeted by a tall woman with sunken cheeks and a sharp ponytail. "You the trainee?" she asked, looking him up and down like she was already tired. "Yeah, Eric, culinary student from Portland." She didn't smile. "Lana, I'm the manager." "You ever worked in a kitchen?" Preston nodded. "A few back home. Good, don't slow us down." The kitchen was clean, but there was a weird tension in the air. As the other cooks arrived, Preston noticed how quiet everyone was. No music, no jokes, just tired eyes and fast hands. He was paired up with a line cook named Mateo, a guy in his early 20s with a nervous smile and sleeves rolled up past his elbows. Mateo guided him through the morning prep, checking broth temps and slicing green onions. "Broth's the soul of the bowl," Mateo said, repeating the company's motto. "But we don't really do it like the book says anymore." Preston looked over. "What do you mean?" Mateo hesitated. "You'll see." Preston didn't push, not yet. By lunch, the place was packed, college kids, office workers, even a few older regulars. Preston worked the line, building bowls, watching how ingredients were measured, what went out, what came back. Then Lana called out, "Eric, try one of the miso bowls. We always let new hires taste the menu." He nodded, grabbed a spoon, took a bite and froze. The broth was thin. Barely any umami, it tasted like dishwater with salt. He looked at Mateo, who was wiping down the counter. "This is what we serve." Mateo gave a quick side glance. "Yeah. Why?" Mateo leaned in, voice low. "We water it down every day. Lana says it cuts costs. We're only allowed to use half the base now. The rest's hot water." Preston's stomach curled. He looked around. No one else seemed surprised. No one looked guilty. This was normal. He didn't say a word for the rest of the shift. Later that afternoon, as the crowd died down, Preston mopped the floor in the back kitchen. His hands were shaking. Years of work, recipes, sourcing, brand reputation, and they were dumping hot water into it like it was instant soup. He didn't eat dinner that night. Just sat in his rented studio, staring at the ceiling. He trusted the district manager, trusted the numbers. But now, he couldn't ignore this. Something was broken, and not just the broth. Tomorrow he'd dig deeper, see how far this went, and then he'd fix it. Or burn the whole thing down trying. The next morning, Preston arrived 20 minutes early. The alley behind the shop still smelled like fryer oil and wet cardboard. A single rusted vent coughed steam into the cold air. He leaned against the wall, watching the back door like a man waiting for a storm to break. At 6:40, it opened. A young woman stepped out, tying back her curls with a rubber band from her wrist. She wore a faded black hoodie with the shop's logo barely visible on the back and carried a clear plastic bag of mushrooms. "Morning," Preston nodded. She did a double take. "You're the new guy, right, Eric?" He nodded again. "Taylor," she said. "I do most of the veg prep." "Sorry if I looked confused, no one's ever early." Inside, the kitchen lights had just flickered on. The walk-in hummed from the corner and the air still held the ghost of yesterday's miso. Taylor moved quickly, setting up a cutting board. She didn't speak much while working, but her movements were sharp and efficient. Preston noticed her forearms were covered in faint knife nicks, the kind that only came from repetition, not carelessness. "You always open?" he asked. 5 days a week. "Lana doesn't like mornings." Preston took over slicing scallions, matching her rhythm. "Been here long, 4 years, since I was 19. She didn't look up. "Didn't think I'd still be here." "Why stay?" She hesitated. "I liked it before." A timer buzzed. She shut it off and moved to the fryer station to start the oil warm up. That was all she said. By 7:30, the rest of the staff came trickling in. Mateo looked like he hadn't slept. His uniform shirt had a grease stain that hadn't been there yesterday. He gave Preston a tired nod, then disappeared into the back to prep noodles. The first customer came in at 8:15, a man in a construction vest who ordered a pork shoyu to go. Preston watched quietly as Lana arrived 10 minutes later, sunglasses still on, coffee in hand. She didn't greet anyone, just walked straight into the office and slammed the door. Taylor muttered under her breath, "Must have been a late night." By 9, the lunch prep began. Preston was put on tempura duty. There was no training, just Mateo tossing him a pair of tongs and saying, "Don't overcrowd the basket." The fryer oil was darker than it should have been. Preston dipped a test piece of eggplant. It came out soggy and gray. "Oil's burnt," he said. Mateo shrugged. "We change it every 4 days." "Supposed to be every 2, but Lana says we can't afford that." Preston kept his face blank. By noon, the line was out the door. The kitchen was hot, loud, and tense. Lana barked orders from the register, snapping at Taylor when a ticket was late. "Move faster." "I don't care if you're short-staffed, the customers don't wait." Taylor didn't respond. She just worked faster, her hands a blur. At one point, a woman in her 50s approached the counter to ask if the broth was vegetarian. Lana didn't even look up. "Read the menu." The woman blinked. "I just wanted to be sure. It's literally on the board. If you don't want meat, don't order pork." Preston stepped away from the fryer, walked over, and quietly handed the woman a paper menu. "The miso's your best bet. We use kombu and shiitake stock. No animal products." The woman smiled, grateful. Lana stared at him. "I didn't ask you to play customer service." Preston didn't answer, just went back to the fryer. By 3, the rush was over. The kitchen looked like a war zone. Crumbs covered the floor and the trash bin overflowed with used gloves and boxes. No one moved to clean. Lana had vanished back into the office. Mateo leaned on the sink, wiping his neck with a dry towel. "She does this every day," he said quietly. "Yells all shift, disappears until close. If we mess up, she threatens to dock hours. You ever report it? To who?" "Her sister's the district manager." Preston felt something cold settle in his gut. He turned to Taylor, who was scrubbing the prep table. "You ever get breaks?" She laughed, not kindly. "If we hide in the walk-in." "There's no coverage. Lana schedules the minimum. Says we gotta hustle if we want hours." Preston looked around. 5 staff for a rush that had needed at least 8. No dishwasher, no dedicated expo, no one on cleaning, just bodies trying to stay afloat. He grabbed a broom and started cleaning the line. Taylor paused. "What are you doing?" "Trying not to trip over trash tomorrow." She looked at him a long time, then kept scrubbing. At 4, Lana emerged. She walked past the staff without a word, coat already on. At the door, she turned and called out, "Eric, you're staying late. I need someone to cover dishes. Mateo's leaving." Preston didn't argue, he just nodded. Mateo watched him. "She's testing you, don't let her push you." Preston gave a half smile. "I got nowhere to be." The shift dragged. Preston scrubbed pans that looked like they hadn't been cleaned properly in a week. The sink water turned black, his back ached. He hadn't done this kind of work in years. Taylor stayed late too, finishing inventory. At one point she sat on an empty crate, rubbing her wrist. "You okay?" he asked. "Just tendinitis. It flares up when I'm behind on prep. You should rest." "I do, on Sundays." She stood and went back to counting cases of noodles. At 6:15, the bell over the door jingled. A tall man in a gray blazer walked in, clipboard in hand. He headed straight for the office. Taylor's eyes narrowed. "That's Vince, corporate auditor, shows up every few months." Preston watched the man disappear into the back. 30 minutes later, he came out, chatting with Lana, who had returned, now smiling like nothing had happened. "Place looks solid," Vince said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Inventory checks out. Good P&L control," Preston blinked. P&L, profit and loss looked fine. He scanned the kitchen. Burnt fryer oil, watered broth, no dishwasher, no breaks. Taylor caught his eye. They only check numbers. Not people. When Vince left, Lana clapped her hands once. "Good job, team. Bonus might be coming next quarter." Then she walked back into the office. Preston turned to Taylor. "Anyone ever quit over this?" She nodded. 3 in the last 2 months. One cried in the alley. One just stopped showing up. The last one. She told Lana to go to hell. Didn't even take her last check. Preston exhaled slowly. He'd seen enough. Tomorrow, he'd talk to the rest of the crew. Tomorrow, he'd find out how deep this went. By the time Preston arrived on Thursday, the weight in his chest had calcified into something sharper. He wasn't just disappointed, he was angry. Angry at himself for trusting systems he hadn't checked. Angry at Lana for crushing the people who kept this place running. Angry that it had taken going undercover to see what was happening in plain sight. He stepped through the back door and found Taylor already breaking down a new produced delivery. Hands moving fast as she separated spoiled greens from salvageable ones. "You ever get what you need from vendors?" he asked, watching her toss 2 yellowing cabbage heads into the trash. She shook her head. "Half the time they short us. Lana won't fight it, says it's not worth the call." Preston crouched and pulled a crate toward him. "You all ever run out during service?" 2 weeks ago, we had to cut all veggie toppings by dinner. Told customers we were trying a minimalist menu. Preston said nothing, just kept sorting. Mateo came in next, rubbing his shoulder with one hand while balancing a case of noodles with the other. "You good?" Preston asked. "Yeah, just a pinched nerve, been like that since Monday." Preston stood up. "You told anyone?" Mateo gave a quick shake of the head. "If I miss a shift, I lose hours next week." Preston looked at him. "That's not how it's supposed to work." Mateo gave a tired shrug and dropped the noodles onto the prep table. At 10, Lana came in. She didn't acknowledge anyone. Just walked straight to the register, pulled out her phone and started scrolling. No clipboard, no prep checks, no communication. Just silence. Preston worked the line again, this time beside a newer hire named Andre. Tall, soft-spoken, and barely 20, Andre had been hired 2 weeks earlier. He was still learning the stations, but he moved with care, double-checking every ticket before plating. "Where'd you work before here?" Preston asked. "First job," Andre said. "I was excited, thought it'd be cool making food people love." "You like it so far?" Andre hesitated. "I'm trying, but yesterday I asked if I could train on the fryer and Lana laughed. Said I wasn't fast enough for anything that matters yet." Preston's jaw tightened. "Have you had a full break since you started?" Andre shook his head. "Mostly just eat standing up if I get a second." Preston lowered his voice. "If you could change one thing here, what would it be?" Andre looked around. "Someone who actually listened when we spoke." The lunch rush hit hard. Orders piled up and the line jammed. Lana yelled when a ticket took more than 6 minutes but didn't lift a finger to help. At one point, a customer came up to the counter and asked if the side salad could be served without sesame. Lana didn't even check with the kitchen. "We don't do substitutions. Allergies are your responsibility." Preston stepped in, wiping his hands on a towel. "We can pull the sesame." "I'll prep a fresh one." The customer nodded, grateful. Lana glared. "That's not our policy." Preston didn't respond, just walked to the prep table and made the salad himself. After lunch, he caught Taylor in the dish pit, sleeves soaked and eyes glazed over. "You've been back here since 1? "Yup. Anyone helping?" "Nope." He grabbed an apron and joined her. "You don't have to do this," she said without looking up. "I know." As they worked, Preston leaned in. "I need to ask you something serious." She glanced his way. "If you could talk to the owner of this place, like actually talk to them, what would you say?" Taylor didn't answer right away. She rinsed a pan, set it on the drying rack, then turned. "I'd ask why they never showed up. Why they let people like Lana turn this place into a machine that eats people." Preston nodded slowly. "And if they apologized?" Taylor stared at him. "Apologies don't fix burns or wrists that don't bend right anymore." He didn't respond. At 4, as the evening shift began to file in, Preston slipped out the back and made a call. "Angela," he said when the line picked up. "I need you to meet me at store 11, tonight." His HR director didn't ask questions. She just said she'd be there. Back inside, Preston changed out of the apron and into the blazer he'd brought in his bag. Then he walked into the dining area and stood by the register. Lana was behind it, laughing at something on her phone. He cleared his throat. "Hey, can we talk?" She blinked. "Now?" "Yes." Now, she followed him into the kitchen, arms crossed. "What's this about?" Preston turned to face her fully. "I'm Preston Nolan," she stared. "What?" "I own this company. I've been working here undercover for the past 3 days." Lana's expression didn't change for a long moment. Then she laughed once, sharp. "Is this a joke?" "No," he stepped forward. "I've seen enough to know what's happening here. You've been watering broth, cutting prep corners, denying breaks, and running this place like a pressure chamber." She dropped the laughter. "With all due respect, I've been doing what I have to do to keep this place profitable. By breaking policy. By treating staff like they're disposable. You think you can keep labor costs down and still make margin without being tough. I think you've forgotten what leadership actually means." The kitchen had gone still. Mateo, Taylor, Andre, they were all watching. Preston didn't raise his voice. "You're done here." Lana's mouth opened, then closed. "You can't be serious." "I'm completely serious. HR will be here in 15 minutes. You can wait in the office until then." She didn't move. Preston looked to Mateo. "Can you cover the register?" Mateo nodded and stepped forward. Lana held Preston's gaze for a moment longer, then pulled off her apron and walked out without another word. Angela arrived 20 minutes later. Preston pulled her into the back and explained everything: staff mistreatment, falsified food procedures, ignored safety standards. "We'll handle it," she said. "I'll do one-on-ones with the whole crew. Start with Mateo and Taylor. They've carried this place." Angela nodded and got to work. By the end of the night, Preston sat alone in the dining area, watching the last customers filter out. The crew was quieter than usual, but there was a different energy in the air, something held in tension. Like a storm had passed, but no one believed it yet. Taylor approached, wiping her hands on a towel. "So, that was real?" Preston nodded. "Yeah." She sat across from him. "What happens now? We bring in a new manager, someone who listens. We restructure staffing so no one's running skeleton shifts. You'll get proper breaks, fresh ingredients, and actual support." Taylor looked at him for a long moment. "You know it's not just this store, right?" Preston nodded. "I'll be visiting the others, quietly." She leaned back in the chair. "You've got a lot of work ahead." "I know." She stood. "Well, good, about time." As she walked away, Preston exhaled long, steady, and full of something he hadn't felt in weeks: accountability. He wasn't finished. Not even close. But tonight they'd turned a corner. And from here on out, he wouldn't be watching from a distance. 2 weeks later, Preston stood just outside the front doors of store 11 again, this time in daylight, wearing his own clothes, no apron, no disguise. The air smelled different. Not because the ingredients had changed, but because the people inside had. He walked in slowly, letting the door close behind him. The lunch rush was in full swing. But instead of chaos, the kitchen moved like a well-rehearsed rhythm. Focused, fast, and more importantly, calm. No yelling. No slammed doors. No one darting between stations with panic in their eyes. Behind the counter, Andre was plating a bowl, eyebrows furrowed in concentration. Mateo stood beside him, giving quiet instructions without grabbing or correcting. Taylor worked the pass, inspecting each dish before it hit the tray. They didn't notice him right away. He watched for a moment, unnoticed, as a regular from earlier weeks picked up her order and gave a small nod of approval to the staff. It was subtle, but Preston caught it. Angela had stayed on site for 3 days after Lana's removal, running formal interviews and documenting every issue. Her HR team had implemented an emergency rotation system to redistribute pressure from understaffed stores. Store 11 now had 2 more part-timers and a new assistant manager in training. Preston stepped behind the line, careful not to interrupt. Taylor finally looked up. "You're back," she said. "I said I would be." She nodded and handed off a tray to a runner. "We're short on Menma today." Shipment came late. He glanced at the prep fridge, then back at her. "You adjust the menu, cut it from the special, didn't want to risk compromising anything else." He gave a small nod. "Good call." She didn't smile, but her eyes registered it, not pride, just acknowledgement. From the back, a voice called out, "Chef on the floor." It was Andre, grinning now as he turned to Mateo. "Told you he'd come back." Preston raised a hand. "Don't let me slow you down." Mateo walked over, wiping his hands on his apron. "You want to see the books or the prep logs? Later. Right now I want to taste what we're serving." They plated him a miso bowl. No theatrics, no special garnish, just what went out to every customer. He took a seat near the window, picked up the spoon, and tasted the broth. It stopped him this time for the right reason. Rich, full-bodied. Slightly smoky from the roasted garlic oil with the depth he remembered from the original recipes. He didn't look up right away. He didn't need to. He knew they were watching. When he finally set the spoon down, Taylor was already walking over. "So?" she asked. "You brought it back." She gave a short nod. "We followed the original ratios, no shortcuts." "How long did it take to retrain?" 2 days. Mateo knew it. He just wasn't allowed to teach it. Preston leaned back. "I owe all of you more than an apology." Taylor folded her arms. "We don't want promises, just structure, and some damn rest every now and then." "That's fair." She looked him over for a moment. "You staying long? I'll be rotating through every store for the next 4 weeks, 1 per week, no warning." She raised an eyebrow. "You going undercover again?" He shook his head. "No, I've seen enough from the shadows." Mateo approached, holding a clipboard. "Prep charts. We've been logging everything down to the gram. Thought you'd want to see." Preston scanned the page. "You changed the tear batch size." "Yeah. We do smaller batches twice a day, cuts down on waste and keeps it fresher." Preston nodded. "Smart." Mateo hesitated. "There's something else about the fryers." Preston looked up. "We cleaned them every 2 days like you wanted, but we noticed the seals were wearing down from the extra strain. I called maintenance. They already replaced the gaskets." "You called them directly?" Angela said. "We're allowed to now." Preston exhaled. "You are, and you did the right thing." Mateo looked relieved, not pleased, just relieved, like he wasn't used to not being second-guessed. Angela entered the shop a few minutes later, carrying a thin folder. "Performance audit," she said, handing it to Preston. "No red flags, guest satisfaction up 12% since the management shift, repeat business is climbing. And no one's called out sick in over a week." He flipped through the pages, scanning the data, then stopped. "What's this?" he asked, pointing to a line item. "Staff submitted a proposal to create rotating lead roles during peak shifts. Gives people a chance to learn, plus spreads responsibility." Preston looked at Taylor. She shrugged. "We figured if no one's coming to save us, we'd better start building people up. You want to run training, I want us to stop burning out." Preston turned back to Angela. "Approve it. Set a budget for paid training hours." Angela nodded and stepped aside to take a call. Andre walked over with 2 bowls in hand, one for himself, the other for Taylor. "Break window just opened. We're taking it." Preston raised an eyebrow. "You get a break now." Taylor took the bowl. 10 minutes, not much, but enough. "Any issues with coverage?" "Not as long as we stagger them." She and Andre sat by the back wall, eating in silence. Preston made a note on his phone. Staggered micro breaks pilot in other locations. He turned to Matteo. You staying on full time? Matteo hesitated. I want to, but I was thinking. Can I shadow the training manager next month? Why? I want to teach. I've been doing it anyway, might as well make it official. Preston looked him in the eye. You've got approval. Have Angela set it up? Matteo blinked once, then gave a quick nod. By the time the rush ended, the energy in the kitchen had shifted. Staff were actually talking between tasks, not forced chatter, real conversation. Andre was showing a new prep cook how to portion rice. Taylor was double-checking the allergen board. Matteo was restocking the dry pantry without being asked. Preston stood near the exit, watching the pieces move. Angela joined him quietly. You sure you want to hit all the stores yourself? I have to. If I delegate this, I'll miss what matters, she nodded. I'll prep the next site. Preston didn't take his eyes off the team. Make sure the district structure gets a full review, no more family appointments, everyone gets vetted, already in motion. He paused. And Lana's final paperwork processed. She won't be returning. Good. Angela lingered for a moment. You caught this one in time, but if we had waited another quarter, I know, that's on me. She looked at him. You're the first owner I've worked with who admitted that. He didn't reply. Instead, he walked back toward the line. The crew had started cleanup. The new assistant manager, a quiet, older guy named Jonah, was wiping down the expo shelf without being told. Preston tapped the counter lightly. Taylor looked over. Something wrong? He shook his head. No. Just wanted to say thank you. She rolled her eyes. Don't get sentimental, he smiled. Too late. As he walked out, the bell over the door gave its soft chime. Outside, the sun was beginning to set. He looked down the street, same storefronts, same sidewalk cracks, but the weight on his shoulders had shifted. He wasn't just running a brand anymore. He was rebuilding trust, one store at a time.